The censorship in China is so bad, it basically forced me to sort of give up on speaking Chinese. Some of the people I interact online literally went to jail. Yeah. They know what things that can cause them to get on the list.
I hear a lot, like the Great Firewall of China, that it's hard to access stuff outside of China. Is that not necessarily true?
Yeah, informed people are more careful, and when you're more careful, you have less audience. In the US system, if Trump gets elected again, I think it will be pretty radical.
Yeah.
A lot of people think democracy is optional. I think that's kind of scares me. Yeah. So
today, the information battlefield is like very, very, very important. And it feels like there are some countries that take this very seriously, and then it feels like there are other countries that don't take it very seriously. So like I feel like Iran and Russia especially takes information and information warfare incredibly seriously. I feel like Russia does it better than anybody in the world. I'm joined today by Huey Li, who has a doctor or a doctorate in political science, studying the difference in electoral systems across countries.
Yeah, it's so nice to be here again.
Yeah?
Some of my TikTok comments are like, why are you even talking to Destiny? You guys basically have the same views on everything. So so I guess hopefully we can find some disagreement today.
Yeah. You told me before we were shooting that you didn't realize that I was relatively controversial. But that's good that your fans said that you had the nice comments, that we agree on most things rather than why you're talking to this evil, horrible person. So.
Yeah.
What how did you get into TikToking about politics? How did you go from PhD to TikToking?
Well, it's not like really exactly a choice at first. Well, it's really hard to get into academia after a PhD because that's what I thought. You know, I thought it would be easy. You know, you get a PhD, then you get maybe a teaching job or something. But nobody told me that the job market was actually crazy. And so later, you know, I just basically juggle different things. Yeah, there are different issues going on, kids, and you know, my wife's music study and things like that. So basically, I just, you know, doing whatever pops up. And of course, in 2016, I got sort of a trauma from Trump's election. So I started thinking, you know, I need to. There are some things I want to let out. You know, I need to tell the world. And I used to do a lot of social media in Chinese, but my accounts keep getting deleted on Weibo. So I'm like, you know, maybe I just basically, you know, the censorship in China is so bad. It basically forced me to sort of give up on speaking Chinese. Now I basically only speak Chinese to my wife. So I don't really write in Chinese or it's kind of frustrating, but you know, yeah.
Where'd you grow up at?
Beijing. Yeah.
And then when did you come to the United States?
In 2006 or 7 or something like that. Yeah, it's my it was a long story. Yeah.
Did you do your PhD in Beijing or did you do it?
No, in UC Davis. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I started off at UC San Diego. Then my PhD advisor moved to Davis because, you know, there are a number of reasons. But then, you know, his direction is he was the only professor that studied my direction. So I was like, you know, I'll just move with him. So I transferred to UC Davis. Yeah.
What was the big reason why you moved from Beijing to the United States?
Well, I mean, the most obvious reason is my wife started a program, a master program, but we've been planning this for a while because, you know, it's just in China there. I have a lot of TikToks like talking about it because in China it looks from outside for outsiders it look okay. The economy was okay. The growth, the infrastructure looks fancy, but life there is actually pretty. I mean, if you really spend a lot of time there, it's kind of suffocating because. Especially for me, because a lot of things I can't say. I just can't write, I can't say, and things I think look pretty well, but I can't publish, right? Because, you know, you can't talk about things like sex, LGBT, religions, not just politics. Basically, you know, everything that sounds a little sensitive, you just can't talk about it on social media. So things like that, you know, you can't even... if you write an article for a newspaper, obviously there are a lot of things you just can't say. So, yeah.
There's a lot of, in the West, we kind of have ideas about what it's like to live in certain places. So I'm sure you've seen all the way from tankies all the way on the left will say things like North Korea and China are paradise. And there's a couple bit of restrictions, but just like there are restrictions on the West, and you can't go to a theater and scream fire. There might be restrictions on some things in other places that are, I don't even want to say communist, but in places that they might identify more closely with politically, or at least pretend they do. But then on the right, you've got people who will say, like, if you're in China, if you were in Beijing and you went on Weibo and you said something bad about the government, that like the Chinese assassination squad is going to show up and kill you, and you have no freedom whatsoever to do is choose anything. When you say things like, I feel like I can't talk about things I want to talk about, or speech is heavily restricted. How does that play out? Like, what does that mean exactly? Like, let's say I'm in Beijing. I've got is it pronounced Weibo?
Weibo.
Weibo.
Yeah.
Okay. One of those sounds we don't have in English. Okay. I'm on my Weibo account, and I want to talk about something that you're not supposed to talk about. Am I likely to just get banned a lot, or are there like more repercussions for that, or?
Yeah, it really depends on what you say. Like, there are different levels. If you try to organize something physically, so let's gather at somewhere and protest, and then definitely someone will knock at your door. There's no question about that.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you just say something like, I think this policy is bad or something, maybe it's okay. Yeah. So, but it depends on what policy. If you talk about Tibet, for example, if you talk about some policy that's a little more sensitive, then they will remove your post. And of course, if you say things, if you say something repeatedly, they will just remove the whole account. Yeah, but the fear is constant, right? Because you don't really know. There's no specific specific law saying what you can say, what you can't. So you don't really know when you're gonna get it. You have a rough idea, like what can get you in trouble, but you don't know for sure. So,
personally, what's like your worst experience with dealing with the CCP or censorship or anything like in that vein?
Well, some of the people I interact online literally went to jail. Yeah, but it was many years ago. I don't even clearly remember what they said. But some people they are like activists, right? They kind of help other political prisoners, or they do things like they're dealing with some NGOs, some foreign NGOs, or things like that. And I think some of them maybe they just I don't know, or maybe disclose some information that they're not supposed to. Not really disclosure, because the state secrets are pretty secure in China. You can't really get anything they don't want you to know. But sometimes there are things that it may sound like secret, but legally they're not. But you sort of know that you can't talk about them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so especially things like Xinjiang, like education camps, things like that. You definitely don't even want to mention the words on Weibo, because maybe I shouldn't even mention it here, but I don't know.
Do you ever go back? Would you be worried to go back, like to visit?
I'm definitely worried, but I don't think they will. I don't think they will bother dealing with me right now, because I don't really have direct conflict with them at this moment. I'm mainly talking about American politics and other, and maybe Putin and things like that. I'm not directly targeting them, and so they will probably. I don't know. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But either way, I don't really feel like going back. There's really not much I miss. Yeah. Maybe except some food, but
what is Panda Express not good enough for you here? You have problems with American food, the American Chinese food?
Yeah, actually, there are some pretty good Chinese food in America, but not in Miami. I think.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is leaving China a big deal? Like when you wanted to come here to do a PhD, like I imagine for a place like North Korea, you can't just leave and study somewhere else. In China, is that a big deal at all, or does it seem as a big deal, or is it whatever? Or, I imagine it's a huge country. There's probably lots of people coming and going all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on where you live, because China has this hukou system. I don't know if you heard about it. It's like a sort of people are categorized by where they're from, and it's really hard to change your hukou. Like, let's say if you're born in a big city, it doesn't mean you're the resident of that big city, right? But if your parents come from some rural area. They came here for some, cleaning jobs or something. And even if you're born here, you're not considered a formal resident of that city, right? So, and for the rural residents and for residents from small towns, it'll be harder for them to apply for a passport. And maybe people will ask them more questions like, why do you want to go out, or things like that. Or what's your purpose? Where did your money come from? Maybe things like that. I don't know. But I'm fortunate enough to grow up in Beijing. I'm Beijing resident, so it's easier for me. Nobody will ask anything. I just go get a passport and, yeah, and that's it. Yeah.
Is there any kind of social credit system, or is that like a total fabrication of the West, or what is that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's something new. Like it's like it depends on like newer technology. So back in my days, there wasn't things like that. They probably still keep track of what you did, but I don't. But there's no numerical systems.
Okay.
Yeah, but now I don't know. I think it's probably real because. People on Chinese social media also talk about it, but exactly how much it impact people, I'm not sure, because I think most people are trained to be careful, it's a mindset like you grew up with, most people know what things, they know what things that can cause them to be get on the list, so they just won't do it, right? So, but if you actually decide to do something, I'm pretty sure it's real. I heard stories about people not being able to get on the train or things like that. Maybe because they went to protest a certain something, or maybe they petitioned about something, or maybe they wrote about, like sometimes there's this petition system. Theoretically, you can report your local officials' corruption to the central government, to some agencies, to some disciplinary agencies. But if you actually do that, chances are they will find out and do something about it. So it's
okay. Yeah. I have a lot of questions about the difference between China and America. We'll come back to that. Why did you choose to study with a concentration in political science, electoral systems? Why, of all the things, did you already have your PhD in mind before you came from Beijing to the United States, or what did you do that?
Not really. It's I have to say I was always kind of a political person. I read a lot of political news, and I spent a lot of time thinking about these things. So I thought, if I have to do a degree here, because back then my English was, it's still not good, but back then it was really bad. So I have to go to school to sort of to fit in. So if I have to study something, I think, political science is probably what I was most interested in.
Okay. Yeah, you say your English isn't good, but doing politics is probably one of the harder things in a second language. Imagine. So you're doing
Yeah. If I do a STEM degree, it will probably be. But I forgot about all the STEM stuff.
Sure.
By the time I was here, so
most Americans couldn't do it either. So you're good. Do you think that there's a significant difference, or does it feel significantly different the way that political stuff is presented in China versus America? Like when you say you're interested in politics in China, again, in my mind, I'm thinking like, okay, well, everything you're getting is filtered through the CCP. I don't even know what you think about other political systems around the world. What were a few major impressions you had, say, like of the United States, and then you come to the US? Was it like majorly different than how they presented in China, or what was that like?
I don't think they presented U.S. politics a lot. I mostly, try to get some foreign some foreign media through VPN and things like that. So I think most of my political information didn't really come from domestic Chinese media. Maybe occasionally, but not much.
What is that like? So again, we hear in the West, or I hear a lot, like the Great Firewall of China, that it's hard to access stuff outside of China. Is that not necessarily true, or?
Well, if you, I don't know about these days, but back in my days, if you want to install an APN, you can VPN, you can, right? So it's a little technically challenging, but for younger people, it's not that hard. But the problem is, if you are not super into that stuff, you will just end up not. So you won't accidentally bump into information that they don't want you to see. You have to actively seek that information, right? You won't. You're not going to just bump into say anti-CCP information, right? So yeah, if you want to read about those things, you have to actively try it. You have to get a bit, but most people don't really actively seek that information. I think that's the main purpose of the Great Firewall.
Okay.
Right? Some people say the Great Firewall doesn't mean anything because you can use VPN. But then my question to them is that if it doesn't mean anything, why bother building it, right? So they spend a lot of money building it, and it was pretty challenging, right? They have to keep updating the blocked list, the blacklist, and it's a lot of work.
I had a friend that invites me sometimes to do like little presentations to his college classes about like how to do research or how to gather information or whatever. And one thing that I try to stress when I talk to people, you just kind of brought it up, is if there is no such thing as like passive information gathering in a positive way. Like if you're sitting in front of a terminal or you're sitting in front of a screen and something is being fed to you, you're not really doing research. You're being told a particular thing, and you should be aware of that. There's a huge difference between gathering information that way and like going at it and intentionally, like with an intent to search for something. And a lot of people have, there's so many people I talk to where like, oh, what do you get your news from? And they're like, oh, a variety of sources. And what a variety of sources means is it'll be like, they'll think like, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all these things. But what they're actually seeing is like, Dave Rubin or Tim Pool or Joe Rogan going over Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. And the difference, it seems minor, but it's everything. Yeah.
Yeah, but the good thing about here is that there are different people trying to brainwash you, but they're drawing you from different directions, right? So statistically, you get a relatively balanced view, even if you're too lazy to think, but still, because there's Joe Rogan, but there's maybe Destiny and people like drawing them from. I'm not saying you try to brainwash people. Maybe you do. I don't know, but I mean. You're drawing the people from, toward different directions, right? But once you have this great firewall, you don't have that chance thing involved, right? Everything is basically, you have only one side that has the capability to brainwash you. So,
super disagree with the pulling from different directions, but we'll come back to that. You come to the United States. You already have a master's degree, or do you get your master's in the U.S.?
No. Yeah, I also did a like international relations master's in the U.S. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a long story. I don't want to get too much into the private information, but it mostly have something to do with immigration and everything.
Okay.
Yeah, you want something to do here, right? So, and obviously also has something to do with my poor English back then. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Are there a lot of English TV shows in China or no?
Oh, well, you can download the privacy versions. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't think that officially. Maybe these days there were more like authorized downloading, but yeah, back then it's mostly just illegal versions. But nobody would enforce that.
Sure.
Yeah, as long as it's not like a political show. But if it's a normal like France, like you can just buy the DVD.
Okay.
Yeah.
I only ask because there's a lot, and so obviously there's a selection bias because I'm a streamer, so they're already watching English content. But a lot of Europeans I talk to said that their English vastly improved, or they learned English because they would watch either streamers or English TV shows all the time and wherever they were.
Yeah, they definitely helped. I think. Yeah, they definitely helped. Yeah, but of course Chinese is farther away from English, so it's,
sure. Yeah.
So it's
Okay. So then you come to the U.S., you do a master's, you do a PhD in the difference between electoral systems. Is there a major point in your time in the U.S. where you decide, like, I want to stay here? Or as soon as you came from Beijing to the U.S., was the idea that I'm permanently immigrating, I don't want to go back, at least not to live there? Or
I don't think even before I came here, I didn't really think about going back because it just not just political reasons. There are some other, really practical reasons, like things like air quality, right? Beijing's air quality is, I mean, you can go to less industrialized cities, but then the life quality would be even worse, right? So the education, shopping, things like that. So, but if you want to stay in big cities, then the pollution is really bad, and especially. Yeah, the area around Beijing, like basically there you can see the sun basically. Yeah, so there's always some smog going on, and it's back then I didn't have kids, but we were thinking about if we have kids growing up in this environment, we can't take them outside. It's kind of depressing.
Okay.
Yeah, and of course I don't know if you heard about the recent report. I think we talked about this last time. So there was this. Report about they use the same truck to transport cooking oil and some other industrial liquid. Right? So things like this are pretty common. So maybe they don't really affect life expectancy as much as
McDonald's
it appears
does, maybe.
to be.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, but still it feels uncomfortable raising kids in that environment. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Enough about your
And
background.
now it's definitely too late because my kids hardly speak Chinese. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Background out of the way. Politics. Real quick, how old are your children, do you say?
They are older than it's kind of a revealing my age, but it's okay. They're older than you think. My oldest one is 16. My younger one is 13. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So many. The first thing I want to comment on is you mentioned the smog in Beijing. Something that I'm on my hate conservative arc right now. So ordinarily I try to be like empathetic and compassionate, but over the past few months I've been very angry towards conservatives. So that's coming out a lot more. Yeah. One thing that people will say all the time, and I hate it, is people like, growing up, remember all these things we were worried about? There was supposed to be huge pollution in the major cities. The acid rain was going to be a big thing. The hole in the ozone was going to be a big thing. And wow, guess what? All of those things went away. Like, it looks like it never really mattered. And people don't realize that the intentionality that went into, like, I saw pictures of like LA in like the 80s and the 90s. Like, holy shit, it's horrible. Like actual like smog, and not fog, okay, not weather, but just smog. Yeah. And people in the United States so much take for granted a lot of the regulatory agencies. And it's like, well, maybe some of these things exist for a good reason. And one of the things that I hate the most, I don't know if I would consider it, I don't know if I would say it's a weakness of democracy in and of itself, but a weakness to things in general is that when things are going well and when things are happening correctly, you take everything for granted and you don't really think about it at all. Yeah. But the second something is like messed up, or if you have a perceived injury or you think something's messed up, now everything is like you never gave those things credit, or you want to attack something different. And it's very frustrating that when things are being run pretty well, like I think the FDA in the United States does a pretty decent job at what it does, but because nobody sees any errors or whatever, they just like discount it. Like, we don't need it. We should abolish the FDA. We should abolish the DEA. We should abolish, not the DEA. I want you to abolish the EPA or all these other things. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of bosses are like that. I think when their employees are doing a good job, maybe they don't even realize they're, I don't know.
Sure. Do we even need compliance? Do we even need auditing? Like, we haven't made any mistakes. And I was like, well,
and foreign policy is a big, it's a really good example of that. Like the whole American continent that don't have any, haven't had any war for how long? I don't know. Decades, right? The entire two continents didn't have any war in the last few decades. That's really impressive, if you ask me. And maybe the U.S. did some bad things to some countries at some point, but in the long run, it worked somehow, right? So the Latin America's economic growth rate has been pretty okay. Maybe not as high as East Asia, but still okay, right? So in the last 6 years, I think their average growth rate was higher than the U.S. actually. So I think the foreign policy it's really easy to see the bad part, like which countries are fighting, but the good part is just
focusing in on electoral systems. I read I went to Israel a couple months ago, and as part of like my reading and research for that conflict, I read Theodore Herzl's a book called A Jewish Nation. Basically, it's kind of it's a really long pamphlet. It's like 90 pages, but it's an easy read about his argument for why there should be a country for Jewish people. And I'm sure he's written more extensively about it, but there's like 2 paragraphs where he very quickly does away with the notion of democracy. And he's like, technology has advanced way too much. Society's come way too far to decide complicated matters of the state with simple yays and nays. And a monarchy would be better because you have a family trained in politics and you don't have the inherent drag of having a political class. All these people could be aimed towards being lawyers, doctors, or whatever else, and you won't have all the drag on your culture of people debating politics constantly and the drag on your economy of people doing political work full time. They could be better deployed in other places. I'm looking at the United States right now. I look at other countries. Obviously, everybody's got their problems. How do you feel broadly about the idea that democracy requires some kind of an informed public, and the situations that we're faced with today are so complicated that maybe it's starting to escape what the public can reasonably evaluate and then therefore vote on a politician to take action on?
Yeah, I can talk about it forever. So the public is ill-informed, of course, but the rulers, like they say, if you have a monarch, if you have an emperor, are they really that well informed? I doubt it. I really doubt it, because especially when they have an echo chamber, like, is Putin well informed? I doubt it. If he was well informed, how did he end up losing territory? That's right. So I think people have this fantasy about dictators being well informed. They're not like they. I don't know. I mean, Xi doesn't even speak English. Like, how well informed?
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because,
that's amazing to me.
Because that's not just him. It's the whole generation thing. Because when you grew up during the Cultural Revolution, because during the Cultural Revolution they basically closed all the universities.
Okay.
Right? So yeah. So if you graduated from high school between 66 and 76, you have no college to go, right? So even if you are one of the elite class, but you still have no college to go, they're just closed. Yeah. So
I guess that makes sense. Kind of. I guess I was surprised when I was in Israel. I would have assumed way more of the population spoke Arabic, and very few Israeli citizens who are Jewish speak Arabic, even though a lot of their parents did. But for similar-ish, well, I can't speak to China's background, but maybe for similar-ish reasons, when people came, the cultural assimilation was really important, and everybody had to learn Hebrew because you wanted to be a part of the culture, and everybody just kind of like stopped speaking Arabic. And that was just surprising. It was like, okay, well, damn, all of your neighbors are speaking Arabic. All their media is in Arabic. And even learning that a lot of the delegations that would go for negotiations for peace deals and stuff with Palestinians or with other Arab states, most of those people didn't speak Arabic. And I'm like, geez, that seems like a major disadvantage. I would have assumed that Xi and Chinese leadership at least, I would have just assumed that, but okay.
Yeah, of course, his staff probably.
Sure.
Yeah, but still, I think it's wrong to assume dictators are well informed.
That's fair.
And also, there's this theory called there are a lot of names like Miracle of Aggregation or Condorcet-Jerry theorem, or like it's just saying, like, let's say if you want to guess how many coins are in a jar, right? So it's normally your guess will be way off, right? But if you gather 100 people to guess and then take their average, normally it's okay. So it's not because the 100 people are more informed than that one person. It's just because, their misconception kind of cancel each other out.
Yeah, you brought up a really interesting point when we did the joint show. I hope it's already released so that these aren't out of order and that doesn't make sense for me to reference it. Yeah. But you brought up a good point that I'd never considered before. Have you ever heard of prediction markets? Basically, online, a bunch of people can come together and vote on the probability of something, and it tends to be pretty accurate. You brought up something that I thought was really interesting that I never considered before, that one of the nice things about democracy, irrespective of everything else, whether people are smart or dumb or whatever, you can get a gauge very quickly on what the public thinks about something. And I think you use China as an example, but like in a system where it's like a single party rule and the voting doesn't really matter as much, you have no idea how divergent the public opinion might be from the administrator's opinion because you don't have that voting check just to see what the people are feeling on things.
Yeah, and it just yeah, I mean, some people use like say so many people voted for Trump, but still Trump never won popular vote once, right? So if you use a sort of a Condorcet, it's actually conforms to the Condorcet-Jerry theorem, right? It's basically saying that some uninformed people were pulling toward different directions, kind of randomly because they are uninformed, so their thoughts are more random. So because they're more random, they kind of cancel each other out. So whoever is left is like more informed people, right? So eventually, the right decisions will always slightly win over the wrong decision. Not always, but more likely to win over the wrong decision.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, but of course it doesn't always work. There's always, because it's statistical, and also, there are a lot of assumptions, right? If you have to assume people have the same goals, same general goals, right? But if some people don't even want the country to be good, that's also a different. And also maybe there are some distributive aspects, like if they have a better life, then it means I will have a worse life, right? So in that case, the miracle of aggregation may not always work. Yeah, but when you look at the really, really important decisions, like like famines, right? So democracies don't have famines, right? That's one of the even like really poor democracies don't have famines. So
I saw a big paper that had come out on that, I think a few years ago, I think, but it was essentially that if you track famines, I think the thing that they could tie it closely to was how liberalized the country was in terms of democratic values. I want to say the paper's authors, they posited that because freedom of the press and information could travel, you just couldn't bear a famine like that. It would be disastrous for the leadership and everything else, and everybody would know. But in like dictatorships or in monoparty rules, where the information is more tightly controlled, you can have huge sections of the population that are just starving to death and nobody knows, and you can't mobilize resources as effectively and everything.
Yeah, I think that, and also information wise, like even though because everyone has the same interest of not having a famine, so it's not like a distributive issue. It's not like I want gay marriage or I don't want gay marriage, or I want abortions or no abortion. So famine is something like everyone agrees it's a bad thing, right? So when you have things like this, I think democracy is pretty good at avoiding them, right? Because the people's information will aggregate and toward a policy that's relatively effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I don't like about well, actually, wait. I'm going to go back earlier. Something that you said in relation to different people pulling people in different directions, because I could be like a counterbalance to Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And I can see the benefits of having more control over your media landscape, and I can see the benefits of having a freer media landscape. And in the United States right now, I think that there is I don't know if there's a name for this phenomenon, but have you ever heard the saying, racism never survives first contact?
Yeah.
I'm sure you can guess. If you've got a racist person, if you start meeting a lot of people that you have racial prejudices against, it's really hard to hold on to those like really horrible racist feelings, just because you meet people and people are human and people are relatively similar, as long as you're not having horrible experiences, of course.
Yeah, I guess if you're trapped in an island, they have to live with each other for a while, maybe.
Yeah. Or even if when you look at like liberals in the United States, the reason why they're less racist than conservatives isn't necessarily because they're better people or they've got better values. You grow up around a ton of different people, you see them, and even ignoring all the childhood like psychological effects, you deal with people more. One of the things that I think is really problematic in the U.S. media sphere right now, not just the United States, but the whole world, is we can self-select so much on the internet that I worry that what you said before about different things pulling you in different directions, you can actively filter all of that. Actually, I shouldn't even say actively filter. You can apply an active filter initially, and then passively all of that information will be filtered. And I feel like we're living in totally different realities sometimes between, I'll say, I would say conservatives and liberals right now, but even more strongly, I would say like establishment versus anti-establishment people right now are your two huge rifts online. When you talk to people, it's a totally different reality with no engagement at all with the other side.
Yeah, I think the segregation is definitely because the the miracle of aggregation, one of the assumptions the miracle of aggregation depends on is people make independent decisions, right? People's but in reality sometimes they have peer pressure, they have to listen to their parents and also whoever douchebags they hang out with. So I mean, and when they have an online community, it's they also have peer pressure from that online community. So I don't really know the answer to that. So what do you think? Like is there a way? Is there a remedy for?
I don't know. I was hoping you would have an answer for that. It's scary because there are times when it feels sometimes like one of the things I joked about a couple years ago is that nothing can ever just happen anymore. It's always a conspiracy theory. And something I've done at the end of my debates with conservatives is I'll just start asking, like, the wildfires in Hawaii, do you think those just happened, or do you think they were like either space lasers or arson involved for, I think for Oprah and Barack Obama to increase their real estate. And they're like, well, obviously there was something weird about that. Okay, what about the train derailment in East Palestine? It's like, well, obviously they were trying to poison the environment. What about the bridge that got hit by the giant ship? It's like, well, maybe the Mossad was involved to try to like distract from Israel-Palestine. And it's like, okay, what about the vaccines? It's like, well, obviously, like Pfizer and all these companies are trying to say, okay, what about Fauci? It's like, well, yeah, he had a multi-billion-dollar investment. What about the FDA? Like every single event, every single thing, everything is a conspiracy. Nothing can just happen ordinarily anymore. It's all a conspiracy now, and it is exhausting. The two huge things I probably studied, two or three, I would say, vaccines and COVID was a huge research point for me. Israel-Palestine was a huge research point for me, and Russia and Ukraine were huge research points for me. And in going over these things, like the people doing the conspiracies, they don't even try. You just like hop from one to the next, 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 and they'll have a new one like every week. And the epistemic hollowness of the people that follow these like don't even stop and think. Like in an ordinary environment, if somebody tells you something and they're wrong next week, you're looking at even one lie is pretty hard to come back from. Two or three and it's over. But you'll look at like these conservative figures, and I'm sure it happens on the far left. It definitely does. I'm sure it happens in other areas too. But like I remind people of this constantly. Like every single thing that people said about the vaccines didn't come true, but nobody has to acknowledge that or suffer a reputation hit. There are no mass deaths. There aren't no mass vaccine injuries. No country mandated them forever. They didn't force vaccine like none of this happened. But it's
do you think it's a new thing, or did people use like I mean I wasn't on American social media like back in the days. Do you think it was always like that, or
I think it is new because I think I read this really great article like 10 years ago. Have you ever heard of Adult Swim?
No.
Do you know what Cartoon Network is?
Yeah.
When America first brought anime over, and then when we started to get into, I would call it like absurdist or surreal cartoons. Have you ever heard of like Aqua Teen Hunger Force or C-Lab 2021? They're just very weird cartoons. But one of the things that I think it was a guy, he was the director of programming or somebody at Cartoon Network who did the Adult Swim block. One of the things that he said was he liked TV over streaming services because on TV you had the opportunity to try new things and you would slot it right after another program and you're watching the one thing and then the second thing comes on. But on Netflix, if you put something new on there, no one's going to click it and you're just going to rewatch The Office for the 4 millionth time, which I'm super guilty of. I will do this. I'm the kind of guy who goes to a restaurant and orders the same thing every single time because I know I like it, right? And that idea, I think, carries over into so much of the life that we live now, to where people think that if they can choose things that it's better and that you can always choose for the best for yourself. But I think that being forced to be around people or be in environments that you wouldn't choose, I think there is so much value in that. Like the examples I always give are like Tinder, for instance, right? That if you can swipe and perfectly select your mate, you're missing people that on paper you might have never chosen to be around this person. Or if you look like in classrooms, nobody is picked to be in a classroom based on 52 dimensions of personality matching. You're just thrown into a class with people in your zip code. But somehow most people make friends. Most people grow up. They have, sometimes lifelong friends. And it's because they're forced to be around those people. And I think that with the internet now, the ability to endlessly, selectively curate what you're watching, I think is so toxic and horrible for the human mind. And I think that's unique because of the internet,
But I'm thinking, because TV channels are not exactly random, right? You still have to pick which channel you watch. I don't know, because when I was back in China, there weren't a lot of channels, but here there are more channels. But is it like, do they really get to see new things? I mean,
it's not random. The TV thing was just an example of like, you can force something in front of somebody and they might enjoy it, but they wouldn't have chosen that otherwise. That's the thing.
Okay,
That's the carryover.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So like for media now, a lot of people won't even turn on the radio. You've got podcasts. You can turn on a podcast for a guy that you agree with. Then you get off the bus or you get out of your car and then you open your phone and you're on a YouTube channel that you're subscribed to with a guy that tells you what you want to hear. And then when you get into class, you're checking your Twitter or whatever, and it's people that you follow whose opinions you agree with. The amount of self-selection to sort yourself into this like epistemic hole where you're only hearing the voices that you want to hear. And then there's not in my opinion, I'm sorry, I'm in this field, so I can speak as a industry expert, a horrible feedback loop is created here too, with the level of ideological congruity between all these parties is insane. That I can list, like if you tell me one thing about yourself, I can probably guess like 20, like if I ask you your opinion on Andrew Tate, and you're like, I think he's probably unfairly demonized by Romania. Oh, okay. Now I know that you think Fauci and George Soros are evil. You think the World Economic Forum is trying to destroy the world. You've probably read at one point in time that people want you to own nothing, rent everything, and be happy. You probably think they want to feed you crickets. You probably think that depopulating the planet is the goal of climate change. You probably think the vaccines are rigged. You probably think Donald Trump should be like, I can guess all these political beliefs because of the amount of ideological conformity between all these different moving people. I think it's just really bad.
I never thought about this, but this is something like it's already an equilibrium. You can't really just create something to divert people from that, because I don't know. I'm kind of strange about these conspiracies is that even if it's something a lot of people are involved. Like if it's a conspiracy, then how can you make sure all these people not leak all these people, how can you prevent all these people from leaking?
No, I think you're already down a bad path. Because you're trying to think reasonably about it, but it never works. There's a guy emailed me this, and I still say this is there's always a transcendental thing that is making sure that all of this is always working. And even when you can give evidence to the contrary, it's actually evidence in favor of. Because that's the thing that I always say. Whenever people ask me about conspiracies, I always say, like, if there's more than 50 people involved, it's never happening. Impossible. Today, with cell phones, you can get a leak out of everything. There's no way that like thousands of people are. I would always say that about the vaccines. So you're telling me that, and not only thousands of people, but people with divergent interests, right? If the United States created a bad vaccine via Pfizer, why wouldn't Johnson & Johnson, who has a financial stake in calling them out, why wouldn't they say this is a rigged vaccine, this is making people sick? Why wouldn't China or Russia come out and say the vaccine is killing people all over, the United States won't acknowledge? Why would you not? Like every university, every private company, in every single country, and every single government all seem to be in on this together. At that point, then whatever conspiracy they're in, you might as well follow it, because you're never fighting back against that. But you, the one guy on the internet, why wouldn't they just kill you, right? Like you said, they've killed like Seth Richards. You said that like the Hillary Clinton campaign has the kill list. But then anytime you bring up a counterexample, people say, well, they're just doing that to throw you off. The best example of this is, do you follow any of the Andrew Tate stuff in Romania?
Yeah.
Initially, the Andrew Tate arrest was it was a corrupt prosecution because they're never going to charge them. So it's just corrupt. They're just arresting them to pressure them. It's like, okay, what if they charge them? And now it seems like they're going to. Okay, well, they're probably fabricating the charges. But they're never, like, they're obviously, it's all bullshit. They're just doing this to kick the can down the road. Like, they're probably never going to take them to court. It's just bullshit to keep them busy. Okay, well, what if they take them to court? Well, let's say they were to take them to court. Let's look at two paths. Let's say they take them to court and they get a conviction. Well, of course, the system's rigged. They were always going to convict. It's bullshit. But let's say they take them to court and they beat it. They don't get convicted. Well, of course, they didn't get convicted. The charges were fabricated anyway, so it's just even more proof. Every single thing, I call this the all roads lead to Rome thing. Every single possible outcome is always reinforcing whatever conspiracy you believe in. So there's not even a way for you to have disconfirming evidence. You say 1,000 people are involved, why wouldn't it leak? That just proves how corrupt our government is, that so many different people would be in together on it.
Yeah, but the intention can't really beat math, right? If one person has one out of a million possibility of leaking, but when you multiply 100 people, that possibility will become really high, right? So
that's when you get that's why you have your every now and then your occasional figures that come out, and that's who they lean on. So for vaccines, it'll be Dr. Robert Malone on the Joe Rogan show. For foreign policy, it'll be Mearsheimer for Russia, Ukraine. There'll always be your one or two academic figures that you can lean into. It's like, see, look, he's finally the truth sayer. And it's like, well,
and I don't know. Sometimes the media, even the traditional media, sort of like to amplify those people. I don't know if it's because it's funner or because they share the same. I don't know because the traditional media is kind of annoying these days too, right? So I'm not saying that they're engaged in a conspiracy, but it's just they also sort of have this slight sort of incel tendency. Sometimes when they see people, like see the happy people at the DNC, they kind of feel annoyed. So like the mesh I don't know how to the Ukraine guy mesh I don't know how to pronounce him. Like some people think he sort of represents the academia, but he definitely doesn't, right? But he just has more appearance on the media for some reason.
Because you academics, okay, are horrible people. One thing that's been so frustrating for me is the unwillingness of academics to engage in kind of like, I don't know if I'd call it pop culture, but like the mainstream conversations. And sometimes it feels very frustrating that, do you know who Norman Finkelstein is? Israel-Palestine guy. But I'll have to go out and debate these people who are they're horrible, horrible, horrible people. But they're like credentialed. They'll have, their PhDs and they've written books or whatever. But when you dive into their work, it's atrocious. Things like I hope these aren't the standards in academia. I don't think they are, but like the easiest way I can usually tell if something is bullshit, one is whenever somebody brags about having a lot of annotations, it always is a huge red flag to me, especially after the guy in Europe, David Irving. Did you ever follow any of his stuff or hear anything about him? He was a historian for World War II stuff, and that was what he was known for, was having so many annotations. And when he ended up trying to sue somebody, a lady for calling him anti-Semitic, and then he went to court, and then his work was analyzed. It all fell apart under analysis because when he started following the annotations, the underlying material was never sourced correctly. And there's so much of these types of like hAcademics, or these horrible people that come out, but nobody else in the academic world ever seems to want to come into the public eye to criticize them. And I understand why not, but man, it's frustrating sometimes that I think Joe Rogan put out a public challenge where I think he was saying he would pay anybody in academia, $1 million to debate Dr. Robert Malone, and nobody took it. And I'm like, what the
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I think academics have this sort of a what's the English term for it? Like arrogance. No, yeah, something like that. So they feel like it's
they're above it.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure the majority of international relations scholars are not like, pro-Russia or pro-Hamas or things like that. It's if you're like at least when I was studying, when I was doing my master's, I think they had pretty reasonable, normally they have pretty reasonable views, but but somehow they just maybe they're. I don't know. Maybe they don't feel comfortable, debating someone, because that's not what they're trained for. Like,
Yeah, I
like
understand.
so they debate a lot in their journals, right? In their articles, but that's what they do. But they don't really. I mean, when they're face to face, normally they're super polite, right?
Yeah,
You don't see
and it's a
them,
way different environment for sure. I wish there was more training there, I guess, because I feel like we need the academic world has to justify itself, because if it loses credibility in the eyes of the public, like, I mean, eventually, at the end of the day, a school is just a building. Like, that's all it is. And if people don't believe in them or trust them anymore, and the public, confidence collapses in it, then they're going to lose eventually funding, and then support, and then papers, and then it all just kind of gets flushed down the drain.
Yeah, but you have really good platform. Maybe you can just drag more of them to your.
I mean, I try to, but I'm just one guy, okay, and I'm screaming into the void, man. I got a billion people on all sides that disagree with me, so yeah.
Yeah, I interviewed my PhD advisor a couple of times on my TikTok. Yeah, but yeah, that's just it's just a tiny part of the internet. So I really wish but also maybe sometimes they don't know how to, because they're trained to write things that have so many jargons, right? Sometimes they don't know how to make ordinary people understand their stuff.
I don't believe that anymore. I reject that. I understand the concept, but I feel like, well, at least for a teacher, you should be able to make almost anything understandable. I think you can make. There are things in quantum mechanics that you could make. You can make a layman understand what does it mean to say we don't know where a thing is, but probabilistically it could be in a certain. You can explain these. I think that you're
I mean, ideally they should be, but the problem, I think, that it has something to do with the academic job market, because whether you get a good job depends on your teaching, right? Depends on your social media followers. It depends on how many articles you publish, output, right? Yeah. But the articles, especially the journal articles, the top journal articles, they're all super hard to understand, right? So even political science article, even for me, if I want to read a political science article that's not different from my field, it's kind of hard. Yeah, it's so.
That was something that was difficult for me to understand, especially reading any philosophy, is sometimes as a reader in certain things, I'm like, God, I'm just so stupid or uneducated, or I just can't follow it. But then as I get more into a field, now I feel a little bit more comfortable saying on some things, like, some of these people are just really bad writers. I think a lot of philosophy guys were really bad writers, and some people write really well. I would argue that for Supreme Court opinions in the United States, I think that generally these are written really well, and one or two might be difficult to get through, but once you understand more or less like the format, these are written, in my opinion, in a very accessible way. But there's other stuff where the way that it's written is like, oh my God, it's just bad prose, and then it's like super jargoned and not much is some papers, there are some people, even for stuff that gets published in like Nature and Lancet, some writers write really well. At least your intros and your conclusions and everything are written very well, and other stuff is written very much like, if you're not in the field, you're not gonna get it.
Yeah. I mean, the lawyers, like, they are trained a little different. They have to convince the juries, and they are trained like more like to be more convincing, to be more accessible. Yeah, but the scholars, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Sometimes because when you talk to people, you have to make assumptions what they already know, which jargons they know, which terms they know. So it's sometimes they don't really bother thinking about these things. So I mean, if you ask I'm thinking about the professors I know, if they talk on the internet, I don't know. I don't know how many followers they will get. Probably not much. I don't know.
I guess my feeling is that for a while I agreed. I felt like some things are just really hard to communicate. But then as I paid more attention to the difference in the media landscape between, especially the left and the right, the feeling I would get kind of is that people on the left, or maybe people in academia, they know that they're correct, and that should be enough. But the people on the right spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to communicate something as kind of like slickly as possible, like in the best way. What's the most effective way that I can communicate it? And I'll be arguing with people, and they'll come at me with like a guy who's like, I don't want to say he's an idiot, but he's like this is not like a super well-educated person. They'll be like, oh yeah, well, if you think the vaccines are so good, what do you know about ADE, antibody dependent enhancement? I'm like, why the f do you even know what this is? And they'll have like an understanding of the concept, and it's just for this to deploy for this one conspiracy. I'm like, I don't even know how the f now I have to go and I don't even know what this is. And so I feel like people on the right spend a lot of time, rather than saying like, this is too complicated, they won't understand. It's like, okay, how can I propagandize this the most effective way possible? And then people will start coming at you with good understanding of topics, but they're always just deployed for a certain political purpose. I was shocked in the United States after fighting on the ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine for so long, and people were like, oh, these are miracle drugs, and they would always link you, like N equals 15 retrospective study from Indonesia, and it's like, what am I even looking at, dude? And then when the trans stuff came out, now all of a sudden these people have white coats on, and they're like, well, that's not a prospective randomized control trial. Like this is, I don't actually, the double blind procedure here, I didn't like the methodology. And it's like, okay, hold on, wait. So you know all these things. You know them now. They're like, oh, well, I don't know if I would do variable risk versus absolute risk. It's like, okay, so you know all these things. Where the f was this when we were talking about the ivermectin shit, right? You have the information, and it's even been presented to you, but it's deployed so selectively that, I feel like people are simultaneously, in some ways, kind of dumb, but in other ways, they're very smart. And I think that people have a higher capacity for understanding concepts than a lot of people realize, but there's such a huge social filter on everything that it ends up mind them. And then people look at somebody and they assume that they're dumber than they are, but it's not that they don't understand. It's that social filter and all the social pressure is what's pushing them in that direction, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, another thing I want to say is that academics, because of their professional interests, they are afraid of making mistakes. Right? They're afraid of saying things that are not supported by data. So that makes it really hard for them to talk. Like, because they're also thinking about what would people say about this, right? What would my future reviewers think about this, right? So the format of debate is debate this thing. It's a thing that's that sort of benefits people who don't care about sources, right?
Yeah.
So like Trump is probably good at debate because he can say things that are obviously untrue. He can add a zero to a certain number, but it doesn't matter, right? Because no one has the time to check the sources during the debate, and after the debate, nobody cares, right? But if you're a professor, you're thinking about, well, am I going to lose my tenure because I said these outrageous things?
Yeah, there's no accountability for being wrong. I mentioned with the vaccine stuff, like people were so wrong for so long and it didn't matter. But if you go into, this is an issue that I run into a lot because I have to know so much about a topic, because if I come up against something in a debate and I'm not 100% sure, I try to hedge, but you look so weak doing that. And if the guy across the seat from me, or across the table from me, if he's willing to just be like, this is 100% correct. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. I've never heard that before in my life. Like, no, it's 100. Well, now I look like I look weak because I'm not willing to take a stronger position. It's like, and I could look it up afterwards and go, this wasn't true. He lied, but it doesn't matter because those people who watch the debate are like, oh, you're just coping. You're mad because you got owned. It's like, okay.
Yeah. So but of course, if you're super elaborate, like people like you can still handle that, right? Because you talk fast and you think fast, so it may be able to
a little. It's still really hard. If somebody's willing to just bite, if somebody's willing to just be 100% confident on like everything, like the problem is that depending on the area that you're in, you just have to be so well read to counter. Like I would always lose a debate against the world's best flat earther. I just can't. I don't have the physics like depth to do it. And if somebody's willing to dig into every esoteric conspiracy theory and then you don't have an answer to something immediately, it's like, this doesn't sound right to me, but like I don't know this particular fact, and now I'm
So I think that's informed people are more careful, and when you're more careful, you have less audience. So that's kind of a dilemma.
Looking at,
I just want to quickly add that the censorship doesn't really solve that problem, because the censors may be pro conspiracy as well, right? So it's kind of a gamble, right? If you allow certain agency to censor, to choose the information for you, maybe they will choose the bad information, right? So I don't
Okay.
know. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, it depends on. Of course, it depends on the quality of the agency, but
You
yeah.
mentioned this about the dictators too, and I'd never really considered this before. And I guess even in my mind, I romanticize dictatorships a bit, even though I mean, I watched Russia versus Ukraine, and clearly something's not working there. But I guess I would imagine, I guess in my mind, what I was thinking of before, this is a really stupid thought. I've just never thought about this, but you've now this is the second thing you brought up. In my mind, I'm thinking dictators have very, very good information available to them, and they just make like kind of malicious choices sometimes. But that might not always be the case, or might not even be the case the majority of the time. They might just have bad information available to them for a variety of reasons, because they don't have democratic systems to point them in better directions. They don't have an aggregated opinion of people to move them in a certain direction. They're just relying on people that they've picked for reasons outside of their field of expertise. And now you've got, state bodies. Like if I think, for instance, the vaccine misinformation in the United States is bad, and I think, well, what if a dictatorship could have made that better? What if the censor believed in the vaccine misinformation? Well, now that's like literally the messaging across the entire country. Like it might be even worse, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, China was relatively good at pushing for vaccination, right? But China also has a lot of conspiracy theory about American vaccines, right? It's still really hard for people in China to get their hands on American vaccines, right? Mostly they just do Chinese vaccines,
I think China made their own,
which are less effective but still okay. It's still better than nothing, but there are more side effects as far as I know. But I don't know for sure because the data in China are also kind of unreliable. But yeah, but so they're of course but the good thing is that they're good at pushing people to get vaccinated. That's true, but I still think it's not. I'm not sure it's worth it. Because I mean no. What was the vaccination situation in North Korea? I imagine it was probably okay, because
I have no idea.
Yeah, because Kim Jong-un doesn't want to get infected, right? So he can basically just force everyone to take the vaccines, right? That's in a way you can say it's good, but I don't think it's worth the downside, because because Kim Jong-un also pushes for a lot of wrong information, right? Maybe occasionally he shares the same interest as the population, but in most cases, he doesn't. So, yeah.
What do you think a country like China fears the most domestically and then fears the most internationally?
Well, domestically, I would say mostly just large gatherings. Yeah. So things like Tiananmen, right? So that's why they take care of people in big cities better than the rural areas. Yeah, because in rural areas it's really hard to gather, to have a huge crowd. Yeah, but even for online content, right? They're most nervous about people trying to have a physical gathering. Yeah, so.
If you were to map the trajectory inside of China over the past 30 years in my life, I'm 35. Ever since I was in high school, I've heard China's either on the verge of a huge collapse or they're on the verge of a huge explosive takeover. And it has seemed to kind of they're kind of pushing along sideways. They're not doing amazingly, but they're not doing horribly. What do you think is what is the trajectory for China right now? Yeah.
I mean, a huge takeover is definitely not likely because once you reach the sort of a middle income trap, you can't keep having 8% of growth. Right? That's physically impossible, right? Even when the amount of capital is saturated, you can't just, because back then there's so much labor and so little capital, right? You can grow really fast, but now I don't see any possibility of keep doing that, right? And also it's a huge country. Of course, you can have some sectors that grow really faster, but the majority of people are still, they still have pretty hard life, right? If you go to the rural areas, I mean, in terms of takeover, how do you define a takeover?
I guess I'm thinking of like, so one thing I used to hear when I was younger was just the Chinese middle class grows. People are going to demand democratic rights or freedoms or more representation in government. And that's like a threat to the administration. And it seemed like that didn't happen as much as people said it would. And then a second thing I would hear was like the Belt and Road Initiative was like the most well-planned, well-coordinated takeover of Africa and the East that like anybody's ever seen. And now I've heard that like, well, actually they kind of mismanaged a lot of this and it wasn't anywhere near as like, precisely carried out as like the West would have thought. It seems like people always start like having these grandiose visions of what's going to happen, and then things just kind of continue on the same way.
Yeah, I mean, the Chinese investment in Africa is, I don't think it's too much different from other countries' investments in China in the 80s, right? It's just, when you see a place with more labor than capital and you put capital there trying to, sort of take, not necessarily take advantage, but, you sort of, I would say just, take advantage of the labor abundance, right? So that's, or maybe resources. That's just, how capital travels, right? So they travel to places that don't have enough capital, right? So, I'm not sure that's enough to have a huge takeover.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean.
So do you think that there's a lot of? Would you say that China's relatively politically stable?
Honestly, I don't really know because everything the thing about China is everything happens behind the closed doors, right?
Okay.
So you don't really know, like when Xi's predecessor retired, right? Nobody know what will happen next because both of his predecessor was appointed by Deng, right? By the guy Deng Xiaoping, right? Right? So he was like a sort of a spiritual leader, right? He was from the revolutions and he came all the way. Yeah. So he appointed not only Xi's predecessor, but also the predecessor of the predecessor, right? So he arranged the entire 90s and the early 2000s, right? So when he died and when his appointees retired, so nobody knew what would happen next. And she did have a competitor, right? So I don't know if you heard of that guy called Bo Xilai. Right? He was he almost became as popular as Xi during the transition, but he ended up in some huge scandal. His wife murdered a British citizen or something. I don't.
Okay, I haven't followed it.
You didn't hear? Yeah, it was.
Did she actually, or was this?
I think it was real. Yeah,
okay.
She actually.
Jesus.
Murdered someone, like sort of poured poison into that guy's mouth, right? Like when that guy was drunk. It was. It was huge in China because that guy was, he was like kind of a far left, super communist and super like singing revolutionary songs and organizing those communist events, and he attracted a following, right? So. But where she was like the sort of the recognized successor by the party leadership. But that guy was also he also had a strong background. His father was also a old revolutionary, and so it was. Back then, there was a lot of uncertainty, right? So if that guy didn't end up in that scandal, who knows what will happen? Maybe maybe the party will split into two factions, and maybe they will start, I don't know, try to appeal to the public and even start running elections. I don't know. There isn't enough. There aren't enough samples, right? There aren't enough, past examples to learn from, because China is too special, and all the past communist Soviet Union, all the past Soviet blocs, they have different experience after the Cold War, but China has a completely different experience, so it's really hard to predict.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think China will have a special interest in Taiwan coming up? Do you personally think there'd be like any type of military conflict that could happen, or do you think China's kind of happy with the status quo, just kind of?
Yeah, I think personally, it of course it's a wild guess, right? Nobody know what's going on in Xi's head, but I think it really largely depends on what the United States is doing, right? So if the United States makes it clear that they're not gonna protect Taiwan, they're not gonna do anything about I think Trump said something pretty explicit. Right? He was like, Taiwan took our chip business or something like that. So why should we protect them? Things like that. Yeah, if that happens, I don't see why China will refrain from, some sort of military actions. Maybe I don't know. At least I can't predict the scale of the conflict, but the only reason China has been restrained so far was that the U.S. Navy was there and U.S. Protection, U.S. deterrence was there. So I think it's pretty much depends on the U.S. foreign policy. And if Russia successfully takes Ukraine, that's a huge signal for China. Yeah. So
we've talked before about political systems in terms of like having a parliament versus like a two-party system in the United States. What is your, I guess on a broad scale, what do you think is the best form of government? Who is the best government right now in the world, just in how it's organized, not necessarily the members, but what system do you think is the best?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of prefer. I mean, it's also because academics have different opinions on this, but I sort of prefer a country with maybe 4 or 5 parties, and after every election they have to form a coalition of some sort. It will take a while. It doesn't look very efficient because after every election you still don't know who the winner is, right? Because they have to spend maybe weeks or even months to do this coalition bargaining, right? So, I'm not following France. Do you know how is the coalition bargaining going on in France?
No, I only hear whispers of. I just don't follow international.
They held the election like more than a month ago.
I did follow that. Yeah.
Yeah, but they still don't have a new prime minister yet. So it doesn't, for Americans' taste. Maybe it's a little too slow. Maybe it doesn't. Of course, France may be a misleading example because they also have a president in charge of foreign affairs. But the French system is that if the parliament and the presidency are controlled by different parties, then the parliament will be in charge of domestic affairs.
Okay.
Yeah, but they still don't have a prime minister. So I think for Americans' taste, it's probably a little too slow. And yeah, but the good thing is that being slow means that you have to reach a consensus. You have to reach some sort of a compromise, right? And if you have an extreme party, most likely they will be excluded from the coalition. Right? Even if they have a whole bunch of votes, but other parties don't want to be associated with them, so they will probably exclude them from the coalition. Right? So let's imagine if the U.S. have 4 parties. The chances are, Trump may have the biggest party, but I don't think he will be able to enter the coalition because the chances are, maybe the other parties will try to form a coalition, and yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. So it's like it's like Fox News is the biggest maybe network, but it doesn't mean
that they would be part of the government. Yeah, I understand what you're saying in theory, but I'm curious if, like, let's say there are 4 parties and the Trump party gets like 45%, and there are 3 other parties. If you were
45% of the seats.
Yeah, but let's say for the 3 other parties, they would make up 55%, so they might form a coalition government. But what if one of the smaller parties is like, well, I could be one of 3 over here, or I could go to the Trump party and get a lot of concessions because the only way they can form a government is to let us in.
Yeah, it depends on the bargaining power. If you have 45% of seats, you're definitely gonna enter the government. Yeah, so no one can stop you because it's so easy for you to just buy off a few more seats. Yeah. Yeah, but if everyone has 30, 25, things like that, like Netherlands or I don't know, Norway, right? Every party has no more than maybe a third. So yeah, you have to reach some sort of compromise. Okay. Yeah, but of course, this is far from a consensus. A lot of people think this kind of government may have it's hard for them to make decisions, or maybe elections may become too frequent. Like Israel before Netanyahu was sort of like, even after Netanyahu, right?
Lots of elections.
They had to hold a lot of elections. I don't think that's a bad thing, honestly. But I mean, aesthetically, some people are kind of annoyed by having so many elections.
I think the only thing that would scare me about lots of elections or stuff like that, at least looking from a U.S. perspective, and we saw this a lot with Trump, is I think it's really scary when there's a country that's kind of in charge of foreign policy to be yo-yoing back and forth so much between different foreign political perspectives. Like, I would imagine it's probably pretty scary if you're in Israel or if you're in Ukraine, and the next U.S. leader could take a completely different approach to how you're conducting war or what your foreign policy objectives are. And it's not like it could change a little bit. It could be like completely and totally different. And you have to plan your political and military and foreign policy. Like you have to plan around that basically. Yeah, it seems very painful, I think.
Well, but I don't think there's evidence that coalition governments necessarily, change policy more radically.
Sure,
yeah. I mean, in the U.S. system, if Trump gets elected again, I think it will be pretty radical.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a filibuster in Senate. It's probably hard for him to pass super radical legislation, but the executive power alone is pretty scary, at least in terms of foreign policy, right? Executive alone, he can stop the aid to Ukraine pretty easily without any consent from the Democrats, I think. Yeah, so there are a lot of things he can do. He can stop protecting Taiwan, for example, right? So no one else can send the troops to Taiwan other than the president, right?
Yeah. Or even in doing nothing, he could make speeches about it, and that alone carries like an incredible weight. Like if the president starts saying we're not going to support anything or do anything, even if Congress doesn't agree with him, like I think that signal is very strong. Because if for nothing else, the president has veto power. He could veto legislation from Congress, so Congress would need a lot more to overcome whatever.
Yeah.
When you look at do you think that when you look at issues in the U.S., you said that you spend a lot of time talking about these. What are the things that I think are the most important things that we need to address right now in the United States?
You mean like policy wise?
Yeah, policy wise, maybe structure of government, maybe cultural media. Like what are like three huge problems you think that face the United States today that we have to figure out how to overcome?
Well, I would say, a lot of people think democracy is optional. I think that's kind of scares me. Yeah. So, even though Trump repeatedly say, I want to stay past 2 terms or things like that, or you don't have to vote anymore after 4 years, things like that. And a lot of people are okay with it. I think that scares me because I'm not that scared of wrong policy, because wrong policy can be reversed later on. But I'm really scared of, the institutions themselves become, let's say if there's another January 6th, but with AR-15, right? So if they just, shoot up the Speaker of the House or actually hand the Vice President or things like that, I don't know. But that's something, it's very hard to convince people that democracy is crucial, because some people are like, look, China is doing well, so
it's true. They'll say that, and then they'll also, it goes back to what I said earlier about like you take for granted like the FDA and everything. People say, oh, we don't even live in democracy right now anyway. Like the media is controlling everything, or Congress, the deep state controls everything. So who cares? One of the frustrating things I find when I'm arguing against, I'll say conservatives again, is that I feel like most conservatives would be fully bought into like ideas related to fascism if you just don't use the word. Like I had a whole conversation with a guy where I was like, okay, you think that Congress is basically like all rigged against Trump when he's the president? It's like, yeah. It's like, okay, you don't trust the courts and any of their rulings about Trump, right? It's like, no, I don't think so. It's like, okay. And you think that like the DOJ and then like the FBI, the NSA, these all work against Trump as well. And they're like, yeah. And it's like, okay. So you think that Trump needs to be able to take action to kind of like fight against these? And it's like, well, yeah, of course they're all against. Okay, this is a dictator. You want literally in name and in action, you want a dictator. Like, but you just don't realize that's what you're saying, Yeah.
Oh yeah. And the Supreme Court is actually extremely pro-Trump. Right? Like if there's any rigging, it's rigging in favor of Trump, right? So there's a immunity ruling, right? So that scared the shit out of me, because presidential immunity is basically, if I have to name, as I said on TikTok, if I have to name one thing that caused the most human suffering, it's the presidential immunity, because if they are immune, then there are so many things they can potentially do.
Yeah, it's the first type of criminal immunity that's ever been granted, aside from maybe like diplomatic immunity for like people, ambassadors or diplomats or whatever. Like, there's never been that in the United States before. People are. Yeah, it's very frustrating.
Yeah. So, how much time do we have?
We got another 30, 40 minutes. If you want.
Okay. Yeah. I was hoping I can use your platform to talk a little about Israel because I feel like this thing there may not be a lot of people who care about the Middle East policy, but they may be able to swing the election because I don't know if you're on TikTok. There are so many people like just at least they claim they are single issue voters. They only care about Palestine, nothing else. I don't think, I'm not sure if they're real, but there are a lot of people like that on Twitter as well. Right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of frustrating because people assume like, there's a magic policy out there that can stop the conflict. I don't know. I mean, they have different magic bullets, right? If you ask them, they can give you a different remedy. But I mean, at least you guys should agree on the same remedy, right? Before you claim the U.S. can just magically stop the conflict, and of course, none of their remedies actually work, right? So let's say if you, so I just want people to think about like what will happen if the U.S. suddenly decides to stop, to stop supporting Israel. Like, what's the next thing that will happen? Like if you are Hamas, if you are the Iranian supreme leader, like what would be your reaction? Like, oh, U.S. will stop supporting Israel. So, what are they gonna do next? What do you think they're gonna do next?
For me,
yeah,
I have a good idea of what I think could happen. I've tried the same strategy. I talked to Omar Badar on Breaking Points, and the other side will never admit to any of this because I asked him, I was like, okay, I understand that you think that Israel's committed a lot of wrong and Hamas maybe has done some wrong. I'm just curious, if Israel was a country that existed in the Gaza Strip and Hamas was the government of the country of Israel, do you think that their treatment of the people, the Jews in the Gaza Strip, do you think it would be the same, better, or worse? And he wouldn't even answer the question. And I'm like, okay, I think it's pretty reasonable looking at the history of the region that at the very least you would expect to see Iranian aggression would probably increase a lot. Hezbollah would probably become more aggressive. And I think that Hamas and the Gaza Strip would continue to be more aggressive. It's hard to predict though, because as soon as in history, as soon as like one major thing changes, like everything could change afterwards. Like because I think the big thing would be, sorry, you obviously we can go into this a lot, but like if the United States stopped supporting Israel, I imagine those same people would say we also probably shouldn't support people like Saudi Arabia or whatever either. So now if the U.S. is completely like withdrawn from that area, Saudi Arabia is probably desperately trying to increase the relationship they have with China, because I think China kind of wanted to negotiate deals between Iran and Saudi Arabia, but Israel would be looking at there would be significantly more hostility and death in that region for the foreseeable future, I would imagine, as people start to sort out the new balance of power.
Yeah, I mean, not only more Jewish death, but also more Arab death, for sure. Like what are you thinking? Like if the U.S. sends a clear signal that we're not going to protect Israel anymore, I mean, there will be an October 7th every once in a while, right? So, because why not, right? What can they lose? They don't really. Hamas doesn't really care about civilian casualties, obviously. So, so why would they stop doing October 7th? What's holding them back, right? The only thing that holds them back is because the U.S. has this, sort of military supremacy, right? So otherwise, and if that happens, obviously, if Iran also joins and Hezbollah joins and Houthis, like there will definitely be more deaths in Palestine. Not only more deaths in Israel, but also more deaths in Palestine, right? So obviously, so I don't know why no one is talking about this. I mean, I also kind of annoyed that the Democrats didn't communicate this point very well. But maybe because I don't know, strategic ambiguity, or maybe because I don't know.
I think there's two things going on. The first thing is it actually relates very closely to the United States situation, the two different realities that people live in. The history of Israel-Palestine, man, people, the ultra-Zionists will tell a completely different story than like the Palestinian narrative. There are two wildly divergent histories. And if you believe the Palestinian narrative, then if the U.S. pulled out, Palestinians just want to like live peacefully and happily, even with Jews as a minority, and everybody will get along in kumbaya, and that's it. And people, there's a lot of people, especially young white people in the West, like really believe this hardcore. So that's why they push for something like that.
So you mean like a one-state solution?
Yeah, or Jews could even live as a minority. That'd be fine. It'd be okay. Everybody would be happy. Now, obviously, if you're Israeli or Jewish and you've got not even really far history, you go back 80 years, obviously things like the Holocaust and then all of the diaspora, everything, the fleeing from all the Arab states after the wars. Yeah, obviously you have reason to believe it probably won't be a very happy time. But
yeah, I mean the one-state solution or two-state solutions, those are like relatively long-term things. But I'm more thinking about the short-term thing, like because it's not like the United States can magically make them combine into one state. Like
because the people on the ground don't even support that.
Yeah, so there's no way. So why bother even thinking about it? I mean, like can Joe Biden make Israel give up their state? I mean, there's no way, right? Even if Joe Biden goes out and start bombing Israel, they still won't do it, right? So it's not something like so what's the point, right? But I'm talking about the short-term thing, like what's the casualties that will, what's the immediate military consequence if the U.S. stops supporting Israel, right? So that obviously it will escalate. It will not de-escalate. It will escalate the situation, right? So it's the same as Ukraine, right? If you stop supporting Ukraine, it will only escalate the situation.
Oh yeah, people have a really hard time seeing like one step later. Like it sounds cruel, or it sounds cruel. But I mean, looking at the history of Israel, like reprisal was a big part of how they tried to control their neighbors, because they're like, okay, well, listen, if you terrorist attack us or if something happens, we're going to come back and blow up a village. We're going to have a really big reprisal. And the idea was supposed to be that if you're a country around us, you're going to do a lot to rein in like the people on your borders, because if you don't, you're going to suffer the consequences for it. And in one sense, well, that seems like a really cruel and horrible policy. But in another sense, it's the idea that if you allow somebody to act as a belligerent, unmediated over and over and over and over and over again, well, what's going to happen? You know, people talk about the biggest risk of World War III is Ukraine fighting against Russia. And it's like, well, wouldn't a bigger risk of World War III be allowing Russia to, to screw around with Moldova in 91, to screw around with Georgia in the 2000s, and now to screw around with Ukraine in 20. Like, who's next? Like, what do you mean? Like, we've done, it's stupid. And I don't like to map things cleanly onto, because everybody uses World War II and the Nazis or whatever, but it's like, it's literally appeasement. Like, how many times would it work? Like, just give them this one more sovereign state's territory and it'll be okay. Like, that's crazy. Like the drive to World War III is allowing somebody to act in such an aggressive manner. Also because you sell the message to the world that you either need to be part of a nuclear umbrella, so you need to be part of NATO or some other type of alliance, or you need to get nuclear weapons on your own, because why the fuck would you ever rely on a country not invading you, since apparently if they have nukes, they can just do it, and now everybody's going to say, well, we can't do it because of World War III. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can find the incidents of the U.S. doing evil, but the motivation of the U.S. foreign policy is to keep the status quo, right? Maybe you can say the status quo is evil. Well, that's okay, but at least it is the status quo, which means the U.S. is not interested in changing borders or sort of like the age of empire thing, pushing your controlling more territories, things like that. So, I mean, if you allow Russia to make the decisions, that. But I mean, in terms of Palestine, it's I'm not sure Hamas really is interested in gaining more territory. I don't think they have the capability, or I don't think they even I mean, they're I'm not sure exactly what their motivation is. I think mostly just getting more funding from Iran, or the immediate motivation, like maybe getting more funding, more donations from other oil states or things like that. Yeah, so that means if you don't deter them, then they will have a really strong incentive to escalate the situation, right? And of course, escalation doesn't just kill Israelis, it also kill Arabs. But the thing is, the tricky thing about Hamas is that it doesn't really care about the casualties on its own side.
Or even, I would even reverse that and I say they do care. They care on both sides and that they want more, because casualties on both sides helps their cause. If they kill more Israelis, it's a successful military op. If they have more dead Palestinians, it's more sympathy for the world. Yeah.
I mean, if they only want to kill Israelis, it doesn't necessarily lead to war, because they still have, strategic concern. They maybe think about, oh, what if they revenge or something. But the thing is, they not only want to kill Israelis, they also want more casualties on their side. So that would make it really hard to deal with. So you have to have like a military supremacy over them. That's I can't think of any other way to deter the conflict. So people like, oh, we can just stop sending weapons. But how does that help in any tangible way? I can't think of it. Just because you stop sending weapons, Israel will all of a sudden surrender, or
if you get rid of the Iron Dome, Israel's not going to get bombed more. Israel's just going to destroy every missile launching platform that it thinks it sees in another state. That's what people think. Oh, well, if you get rid of the Iron Dome, maybe it'll be. And it's they're not just going to sit there and get bombed. There's not going to be thousands of rockets coming in. There's going to be absolute destruction in a place where they think that there might be any kind of rocket platform. Yeah, most of the information is usually really bad. The solutions are usually really short-sighted. And people, it's a combination of a bad misunderstanding of history, of current, the current political situation. I'll ask people, okay, well, let's say we have a one-state solution right now with the majority being, the Arab population, and say they vote for Hamas. Would you be comfortable with Hamas controlling nuclear weapons in the Middle East? And nobody would even engage in that question on the other end. Well, Israel, it'll be well, you say that, but the only body that's ever nuked anybody before is the United States. And it's okay, it's not even, it's just complete and total absurdity.
But if you're not worried about Russia nuking people, that means you shouldn't worry about sending Ukraine weapons, right? Because I'm interested in this partly because the Palestine is one area that even some people I like are making super stupid points. When it comes to Ukraine, it's okay. If someone says I'm pro-Russia, I'll just be like, fuck you. I don't even have to engage with them. But on the Palestine issue, there's even some people that I find okay. I find
I just remembered my second point on what you said. Another huge issue with people understanding Israel-Palestine is if you were alive and you were at least a teenager or older in the Cold War, in your mind, and I think this is why Israel enjoys such wide support in the United States from older people, Israel is like the sole democracy in the Middle East, fighting for its survival against a sea of hostile Arab nations. But if you're like my age or younger and you've grown up, the only enemy you really can think of for Israel are the Palestinians, who are obviously much smaller, and it's just Israel bullying them constantly. And from that perspective, I can get it, because growing up, you would learn about the Israeli-Arab conflict, but now it's really just the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and then Iran is kind of in there. And that the scope of the problem changes significantly. And I largely blame Israel for this in having a delusional foreign and domestic policy past 2005 or past 2005, and the idea that they could just keep kicking the can down the road on the Palestinian problem, it would magically disappear, I think is probably one of the most arrogant foreign policy positions that any country can have in the world and has had for the past 20 years. Is insane.
I mean politicians in general have a habit of kicking the can down the road, because they don't expect serving forever. So I mean but I feel like you're right. I think in the 40s, 50s, there are so many countries invaded Israel, right? So Yom Kippur War and the first Arab-Israeli war. There are so many. So it's easy to see Israel as a victim, right? But these days, those countries, I don't know why, but those countries started to sort of, slow down there. They start to become more moderate. I don't know, in terms of foreign policy, not necessarily in terms of, cultural policy, but in terms of foreign policy.
I think that Israel early on because they have the advantage of being the only Jewish state. So it's sink or swim. You can't mess up. There are no mistakes, right? Israel's never really lost a war, because if they did, they wouldn't exist. And I feel like in looking at their history and in reading, like all the conversations to their Ministry of Defenses, all of their Moshe Dayans, all of their prime ministers, there's a huge pragmatic concern the entire time. And you always have these arms of like very strong diplomacy and very strong like military always working in conjunction with each other, because every threat was existential. And you see that a lot in the early operation internally politically in that country. But then in 79, Egypt finally comes to peace with Israel. And then after 91, the Madrid Peace Conference, you've got, Jordan finally comes in line. And after these two countries are removed from the equation, Syria is basically has been like a tumultuous state, to say it nicely, for the past 100 years. I think Israel's like, yeah, we figured it out. We're good. And the Palestinians, and then you've got like the Abraham Accords and the moving of the embassy and everything else. So it's like whatever. But I think the incorrect assumption was, since we have peace with basically all of our major neighbors, we're good. And that type of arrogance has betrayed. I think Israel is the biggest threat to it right now.
Yeah. But Iran sort of took over the like
hostilities.
I'm not sure like what Iran is trying to achieve here, but what do you think the Iranian supreme leader was thinking? What he was trying to achieve here?
I've studied Israel-Palestine a lot, and I know what I know about the surrounding countries because of their relationship to that conflict. I haven't studied it because Iran's not a neighbor, and Iran, from my understanding, was largely irrelevant until in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, until like the past 5 or 10 years, I guess. I don't even know how much they helped Hezbollah. I know that Syria was more involved with Lebanon in the 80s and 90s for the first Lebanon war. So I don't know anything about Iran. I don't know why they do what they do. I haven't studied it all to have any fucking idea. I know they were really ass mad at us after the Iranian Revolution, understandably so, because we deposed or helped to depose our leader for Britain. But I don't know what Iran's plan is today. I'm not sure.
The thing about these countries is that their decisions are made in closed doors. They don't do debates. They don't do like congressional, sort of speeches, things like that. So you don't really know for sure. But
this is very frustrating. Because when we talk about this region too, and you talk about look at the atrocities that Israel's committed, and look at this decision and these, you only know that because it's a democracy that makes their archives available for auditing and for access, and historians are writing stuff based on it. You don't have that information from Egypt and Jordan, like the countries that are allied, or any of the surrounding Arab states. And that's true of Iran as well. You don't have public debate or policy debate or
So why would they? Some people assume they funded Hamas because sort of sympathy, because they want to free the Palestinians. But why would they? Why would they care about freeing another country they have no stakes in? So there must be some, I would guess, maybe some domestic politics reasons, because they want to.
Well, I think for the region, the big axis right now is Iran and Saudi Arabia. I think those are the huge major conflicts, and that's why you have Saudi Arabia and Israel. I mean, they were the big signers in the Abraham Accords. So you've got the Gulf states and Egypt, and these are here, and then along the top line you've got Syria, Iraq, and Iran, and that's your big division of powers. And Iran and Syria, have big backing from Putin and Russia. I think China is involved a little bit. I know they helped a little bit for Syria, but that's your big party there. And then on the other side, you've got Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States. I don't know why. I don't know the background. I don't know why everybody doesn't just get along in the Middle East. I don't know, but there might be other things at play too. Yeah,
I think there are some domestic politics, because Iran has a lot of protests recently, right?
Yeah.
So maybe they need to prove to the domestic audience that freedom doesn't work. You can't. If you have a country like Israel, they have this sort of degenerate culture or something like that, so you will end up in chaos and you will end up in killings or things. So maybe we should just keep our system. So there may be, because I sort of believe everything comes down to domestic politics eventually, right? So but I don't know this. There may be some ideological reasons, but but there's no way to tell, right? So Khamenei does have a Twitter account, but
sure.
but he doesn't tweet about his
foreign policy takes.
So
how do you feel about the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict? in terms of, do you think the U.S. has done a good job? Do you think Ukraine and Russia, where are they headed? Yeah, do you have any ideas or feelings about that?
Yeah, I think that would require more knowledge on like military technology, which I don't really have. But I think it's okay. The U.S. did an okay job. Of course, they could have supported Ukraine more, but then there is a risk of saying if you give some more advanced weapons, maybe Russia will take possession of them. That may be a risk. So maybe Ukraine has to prove themselves first. That's why Ukraine is sort of really eager to prove that they can win and they can keep the equipment and things like that. I don't know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But but I think it is kind of frustrating that some U.S. officials are still worrying about Russia throwing nukes, because it's just, I don't think it will happen. It's especially if you're a losing side, what's the benefit of, right? So yeah, I TikTok about this because the reason the U.S. used nukes in the 40s because it was on the winning side, right? It doesn't really care about the political consequence or the repercussions, because we are the winner. We're the people loved us anyway. Like, not only domestic audience is happy, but international audience loves us.
Sure.
So
we also had the advantage there were no nukes yet, so nobody had seen like the destructive. There wasn't like the worldwide condemnation, I guess, or feeling about nuclear weapons yet too.
Yeah. So yeah, but at least they are the winners. So even if they did something wrong, people will forgive them. But if you're on the losing side and you nuke a bunch of people, a few million people, what's going to end up for you? I don't think that's ever going to happen. Even someone like Putin, he still has children, he still has relatives. So like, why would he want to?
Sure. And I don't even think other countries. I don't think like Brazil, India, China. None of these people are co-signing. I don't think like Russia nuking any part of Ukraine. I don't think they would have any support for that decision.
Yeah, and also Russia has a chain of command, right? So even though legally Putin is the only one who can make the decisions, but he still relies on all these people below him to actually operate the system, right? So but these people probably don't want to die either. So
hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, are they that brainwashed? I don't know. I mean, it's not like the 60s or 70s, like.
I mean, even in the 60s and 70s, it was really interesting. I was reading articles about, or it was a big write-up about a lot of the stuff that was going on in the Soviet Union. I think it was a retort to the idea that capitalist countries are like these horrible, polluting, terrible, bad for the environment, and like socialist, communist countries are so much better and whatever. And it had to do with a lot of the environmental crimes, the environmental atrocities that happened in the Soviet Union. One was basically the complete and total draining of the Aral Sea, ARAL, I think. I think it was like the fourth largest sea in the world, and it basically got completely drained because they were mismanaging it. Or like the hunting like certain whale species into extinction because of just like arbitrary quotas, like you have to fish this many. And a lot of the people that kept the data on this weren't supposed to, but they were like scientists, and they're like, well, we have to record this shit, like we should. And a lot of the data that came out was just because people were writing stuff down and recording stuff that they probably shouldn't have been. So even in the 60s, 70s, 80s, at the height of like Cold War stuff, like people were still had that mind to kind of do the right thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just about like moral choices. It's also they don't want to die. Like if you go along with the nuke orders, like obviously you're not going to survive this, right? So
sure.
So why would they do that? So I mean, but if you give Putin a chance to win, that's when he might thinking about win even faster. Maybe if he feels his positions are secure, then maybe why don't I try some nukes? It's still very, very, very unlikely.
Yeah.
But it's slightly more likely.
Especially because there's like Putin tries to live in both worlds where it's like a special military operation. It's not a full-on military conflict. These are still our brothers and sisters. We're just trying to get rid of the Nazi elements and fighting like the worst parts of the government. But I think as soon as you start lobbing nukes at people, you lose the ambiguity completely. You can only live in one world at that point. Like
So that will require a lot of people going crazy at the same time. So I definitely think the U.S. policymakers are a little bit too conservative, not the culturally conservative, but I mean too strategically conservative at this point.
Yeah, I'm happy. Initially, I was really happy that about the intelligence leaking, that we basically said Russia's going to invade. I hope everybody knows this. That was good. And I thought Biden,
that was good. Yeah,
getting everybody together to say like, well, we're going to support Ukraine. I thought that was good. But looking retrospectively, I wish it would have been a little bit more like go hard, like do what you want, rather than this like, okay, we're going to give you a little bit, but don't attack past here. And then like Russia sets all their people up, right beyond the line because they know that they're safe here. And it's like, we'll give you a little bit more, but don't shoot into Russia ever. That's not okay. And we're going to do that. And like, I wish it's like now, like watching like Ukraine invade or being able to shoot into Russia, like you should, it's a fucking war. The idea that the other side is allowed to invade you, kill your people, commit massacres, do all this crazy shit, bombing apartment buildings and hospitals, but like you can't shoot into their country. That's ridiculous. Like, they should.
Yeah, but at the very beginning, they still need to, build trust between with Zelensky, because Zelensky is a new guy, right? He's,
and Ukraine historically has not had the best track record when it comes to corruption and stuff. So that's fair.
And obviously, technically, you don't want Russia to take possession of all those advanced weapons, tanks. So
that's fair too. But I hope that now, like, if Ukraine does end up losing the war and losing territory, I hope that it's because they didn't have the manpower, weren't able to do it. I hope it's not because, if they would have just had another squadron of F-16s, or if they would have just had more HIMARS or more whatever, then they could have. But I hope that that's not the case.
If Trump loses the election, I'm not too worried about Ukraine losing. I don't think it's very likely. Because at least based on the current trajectory, it doesn't look like they're losing terribly.
Hopefully,
yeah.
Well, it's hard. I don't have the military background, so I don't actually know. Like, I see like, they've pushed in. That seems good. But like, maybe like the whole economy is on the verge, and then on the verge of collapse in Ukraine, and I'm just not aware of it. And then Russia isn't very honest about what they publish. So like, I'll see everybody on both sides. People say, well, actually, Russia's doing great economically. They thought they would have collapsed by now, but they're doing fine. And then I hear people on the other side saying, well, they've canceled all. Like, you can no longer reserve foreign currency or hold foreign currency reserves, and the ruble is like artificially inflated, and the economy is actually doing really bad. You just can't. It doesn't come out yet, and they don't publish real numbers. So I don't actually know what's going on for real.
I don't really, but I mean, at least they have the resources. They have enormous resources, so they can always trade them in the Chinese market or some.
Sure.
So it's not. I don't think they will become poor all of a sudden, no matter how much you sanction them. It's just, they have the stuff, right? So they can just always sell the oil and the gas. That's something. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. I feel like the information. Did you ever play video games growing up?
Do you have what?
Do you ever play video games growing up?
Yeah.
Did you ever play any of the Metal Gear Solids?
Well, what salad?
Metal Gear Solid.
No.
Okay, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Metal Gear Solid 2 is a great game, and it has a lot of.
Maybe I know the Chinese name because back then, when I played normally. We used Chinese names, so maybe I played that game, but I didn't know.
Maybe that's fine, but basically ignore all that. Basically, the information battlefield is like very, very, very important, and it feels like there are some countries that take this very seriously, and then it feels like there are other countries that don't take it very seriously. So like I feel like Iran and Russia especially takes information and information warfare incredibly seriously. I feel like Russia does it better than anybody in the world. I feel like the United States doesn't. Maybe the government does and doesn't talk much about it, but one interesting phenomenon in the U.S. is that the political party that's best equipped to handle like conspiracy theories, but like if there are real conspiracies, I would say is maybe the Conservative Party, because they're the ones that see conspiracies everywhere. But because of the history between like Russia and Trump and Russiagate and Mueller and everything, the Conservatives won't say anything about Russian intrusion into any of our social media, which is like very annoying and very scary to me. What do you think the future is going to look like in terms of people fighting on these battlefields? You've got the trying to make the divestment of TikTok in the U.S. and everything else. What do you think?
It's I don't know. I'm not too optimistic because maybe they, like Putin has like Putin and Xi, they have like sort of they don't have a hard budget, right? So if they really want to build an online army, build a troll farm, it's harder for the U.S. to do the same, I think, and also how many even if say the U.S. government wants to build a troll farm, like how many of them speak good Russian and good Chinese, right? So, but I think it's easier for the Russians to mess with the English content, right? Because it's way easier to learn English than Americans learn Russian, right? So so yeah, I mean, and of course the AI is probably better at English than
other languages, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so yeah, so the information warfare. I mean, unless. Yeah, I don't think it will improve anytime soon. Yeah, maybe unless Putin gets overthrown for some reason. Yeah, maybe he loses too much and his generals decide to, overthrow him and maybe try to warm up with the West. I mean, I don't know.
You get another God, I know his face from all the memes, but the
Gorbachev?
No, the guy that was he was the leader of the Wagner group. Priest, yeah. Another one of those, yeah. Unfortunate plane crash that he died in after trying to lead a coup, unfortunately, but yeah. Okay, what do you think? What do you think are the biggest things that you find that frustrate you on TikTok? What are the most pervasive, dumb things that you think a lot of people believe in? You mentioned Israel-Palestine was a big one. What else?
Yeah, currently I think it definitely Israel-Palestine is the biggest one. Yeah, because. Yeah, TikTok is also like if you like something, they will feed you more, right? So it's the same problem you
passive
mentioned
information.
Yeah. So I don't really see a lot of really frustrating content. I'm sure there are tons of it, right? But
what do you spend? I guess when you're responding to stuff or talking about what are the things that you think are the most important to emphasize on your platform?
Things to emphasize. Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about political systems, right? So the necessity of democracy, and also I talk about foreign policy, like how U.S. interventions are not always bad, because like the world before U.S. interventions were kind of even worse. That people need to have this. You need to establish a benchmark before you're making a judgment, right? So, but as you said, it's really hard because they only see bad things and good things are normally invisible. Yeah, that's something I'm really concerned with, and of course, I'm concerned with the pro-Palestinian voters, switch side or stay home. That's also kind of scary. Yeah. And
also because undeniably Trump would be worse for Palestinians than Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, regardless of what you think about the Democrats for doing enough or not. Trump literally recognized that embassy move. He said he would support Israel no matter what.
Yeah. But the thing is, some people, some Hamas fans, they don't really. They have the similar mindset as Hamas in the way that they don't really. They don't really evaluate the strategy based on death tolls, right? They don't really say, okay, we make our voting decisions based on how many Palestinians can be saved. It's not. It's sort of they have some they care more about the balance, right? Like if we can kill if they can kill as many Israelis as Palestinians, then it's a win. Something like that. Yeah. So for those people, they may end up voting for Trump. I think it's possible because they don't do the math. They do the math, but they don't do the math based on the death toll, right? They do the math based on sort of the grand scheme of winning versus losing, right? So that's. But I'm not sure how many people, how many of them are out there, right? Maybe they just have a louder voice, but
I think they just have a louder voice, because especially because they tend to be young too, and young people don't vote as much. So,
yeah. But they could persuade some people who originally planned to vote to stay home, right? Because voting is still kind of costly. You have to stay there for a few hours, and you have to, you have to register yourself, and you have to, wait in line, things like that. So maybe they can successfully persuade some potential voters to not vote. Yeah, that can be a problem. Yeah.
Hopefully not, but maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, other things. I mean, before Trump, in general, my feeling about America was that there are a lot of problems, but I don't really care about them because I think Americans are comfortable enough. They have some problems, yeah, they have, but compared to the rest of the world, I think they should just. I'm at least I don't want to spend too much time, studying America, studying like the struggle of Americans because they're nothing compared to what I see in other parts of the world. Yeah, but now it seems like there's a chance that Americans will fundamentally change course, and that will not only destroy people's lives here, but it will destroy lives elsewhere. That's yeah.
It's been a very frustrating thing as I've argued with far right people in the U.S. and in Canada, because Canadians only care about United States politics, at least, or at least the ones I talk to. But yeah, because I heard so much that like Muslims were a threat to this country and immigrants were a threat to this country because they don't share our our fundamental political values. And now when I look at the entire Trump supporting base, I'm like, you guys don't share. I think that you guys are core values are very un-American with the way that you approach government, and you're more of a threat than Mexican roofers or whatever whoever's coming in. You're more of a threat than any of these people ever were or ever could have been to this country. It's very, very, very frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else you want to hit? Anything else you feel like we missed or you want to bring up? Or
yeah, maybe we can save it for the future. I mean, I don't live too far away, so whenever you want to be here, yeah. So it's a great exposure for me. So
sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, where can people find you if they're looking for your stuff?
My first choice would be TikTok / Dr. Huey Li, but of course there's always a chance that TikTok may get rid of me because because the China dimension. But so you can also find me on Twitter, also Twitter / Dr. Huey Li.
It's DrHueyLi.
Yeah, DrHueyLi.
HUUI. Okay, I fucked that up so much.
HUEYLI. Yeah, it's my spelling is like, even if I spell it to people, they can still spell it wrong. At least in Starbucks, because it's these few letters are their pronunciation can mess up each other. Like HUEY. Sometimes people would spell like HUUI or HU. Like it's I should have found a better name, but it's too late, I guess. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm sure we'll have you again in a future episode. And
it's a really nice chat. Thank you for
hopefully we can chat again before the collapse of American democracy. So
definitely. Thanks a lot. Or maybe after. Yeah.
Or maybe after. Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. Okay. Goodbye, guys.